My mother-in-law watched as my husband pushed me out, barefoot, into the freezing rain. "It's about time," she sneered. "There's no room for beggars here." I stood on the icy asphalt when my grandmother emerged from the darkness, a woman who owns half of San Francisco. She looked at the mansion, then at my mother-in-law in the doorway, and said, "Tear it down, all of it." Dear friends, I'd like to get to know those of you who are with me right now. If it's not too much trouble, please let me know where you are listening from. I'm curious to learn about my audience. Enjoy the story. 4 years ago, Mark and I were huddled in a tiny room in Detroit where frost crawled up the walls in winter and rain dripped from the ceiling onto our pillows in the autumn. I remember him sitting on a sagging sofa, sifting through the change in his pockets, counting if there was enough for bus fare to yet another meeting with potential investors. His hands weren't shaking from the cold, but anger at his own helplessness. "Ava, I swear to you," he said, squeezing my palms and looking at me with desperate resolve. "When I get on my feet, you'll live like a queen. No more discounted pasta, no more leaky roofs. Just hang on a little longer." "I believe you," I replied, kissing his cold fingers. The next day, I sold my late mother's earrings and ring. They were the only things I had left of her. The jeweler at the pawn shop on Market Street shook his head while examining the antique sapphire work, but he handed over the cash without extra questions. Mark took the stack of bills, counted them twice, and hugged me tightly, burying his face in my shoulder. "This is our ticket to a different life, do you understand? I'll pay you back 100-fold." For the following months, I ate plain grains and black bread, while he had lunch in restaurants with partners, convincing them of the potential of his ideas. In the evenings, he returned inspired, smelling of expensive tobacco and other people's perfume from handshakes, telling me about breakthroughs and agreements. I listened, warming my feet against a radiator that was barely lukewarm, rejoicing at every small victory of his. My grandmother used to visit once a month from her small town in Oregon, hauling heavy bags of pickles, sacks of potatoes, and knitted socks. Abigail Sarah, a thin old woman in a worn coat and rubber boots, would look around our room with disapproval and shake her head. "You're living like some poor students," she would grumble, lining up jars of cucumbers on the windowsill. "Here, I brought you some raspberry jam, too. At least you'll have some vitamins. And that handsome man of yours is probably out in restaurants again." "Graham, it's for work," I defended Mark. "He has to impress the investors." "Impress them," Grandma snorted, pulling a bag of homemade dumplings from the depths of her bag. "Watch out, granddaughter, or you might find yourself sent away somewhere far." I laughed then, not understanding the prophetic bitterness of her words. What a naive fool I was. The money came 1.5 years later. A major contract, then another. Investments flowed like a river. Mark beamed with pride, took me to car dealerships and made me try on expensive dresses. But when it came to signing the papers for the new house in Beverly Hills, a mansion overlooking Santa Monica Bay, he casually remarked, "We'll put it under the company's name. It's easier for taxes. You don't mind, do you, darling? What difference does a name on a paper make if we're a family?" I didn't object. What difference did it really make? The morning of Mark's birthday began at 5 o'clock in the morning. The catering was supposed to arrive by 8, but I still had to check the table settings, arrange the floral compositions, and oversee the decorators. The massive kitchen of our mansion smelled of fresh baking because I had woken up at 4 to bake his favorite lemon pie from his late grandmother's recipe. "What are you doing in here?" Mark came down in a robe, squinting uncomfortably at the bright light. "I'm preparing your party, honey. The vendors will be here soon. Everything needs to be organized." "We could have hired a coordinator," he yawned, pouring himself coffee from a machine that cost $300,000, "instead of you turning into a workhorse." "I wanted to do it all myself with love," I smiled, wiping my hands on my apron. He shrugged and left without saying thank you. By noon, my legs were throbbing from running around, and my back ached from hanging garlands, but the grand hall looked magnificent. The crystal chandelier, a housewarming gift from my mother-in-law, cast rainbow reflections on the snow-white tablecloths. Champagne-colored balloons swayed under the ceiling. "Ava!" A shrill voice rang from the hallway. It was Regina Valerie. "Ava, where are you loitering?" My mother-in-law floated into the hall in a turquoise suit and began to critically inspect my work. Her Botox wouldn't allow her to frown fully, but her dissatisfaction was evident in every gesture. "Why hydrangeas instead of orchids? I told you, orchids look more noble. And what are these tablecloths? Cotton in our house?" "It's linen, Regina Valerie, Belgian linen. Still too plain." She pulled the edge of the cloth disdainfully. "Fine, it's too late to change anything, but consult me next time. Your taste is peculiar, rural, I would say." I swallowed the insult, just as I had swallowed them all these years.
"Champagne?" I offered with a smile. "Are you the new help?" one of the wives asked, a blonde with overfilled lips. "Mark finally hired some proper staff." "I am Mark's wife," I replied calmly. The blonde exchanged a look with her friend, and both snorted, not hiding their mockery. "Oh, right. Mark mentioned something," she drawled, taking a glass. "Something about, what did he call it? Charity." My cheeks burned with humiliation, but I kept smiling. Mark stood in the center of the hall, surrounded by sycophants, laughing loudly at someone's joke and showing off a new watch worth $2 million. When I approached with the tray, he took a glass without looking at me and continued talking about his latest deal. "Can you imagine? Those idiots thought they could bypass us?" He gestured dramatically, "but I showed them who the king of the market is." "Mark," I called softly, "maybe you could introduce me to Mr. Jiang? We haven't met." He shot me an irritated look, as if I were a bothersome fly. "Later, Ava. Can't you see we're discussing business? You'd better go check how things are in the kitchen." The conversations went silent when she walked in. Violet. A wine-colored dress hugged her slender figure. Her chestnut hair shined under the chandelier, and around her neck sparkled a necklace that cost more than our entire annual budget back in that tiny room in Detroit. Mark practically beamed, and abandoning everyone, he rushed toward her. "Violet!" He embraced her right in front of everyone, pulled her close, and buried his face in her hair. "I thought you weren't coming." "Happy birthday, darling," she purred into his ear, loud enough for everyone to hear. "How could I miss such a day?" The tray trembled in my hands. I set it on the nearest table so I wouldn't drop it. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to breathe evenly. Maybe she's a business partner? Maybe I'm just misunderstanding. "Violet, dear," Regina Valerie shrieked, throwing her arms open. "My daughter, I am so glad to see you." My mother-in-law kissed her son's mistress, stroked her shoulders, and twittered something about true beauty and pedigree. Then she took her by the arm to introduce her to the important guests. "Look at this woman," Regina Valerie announced to the whole room. "Now this is a worthy match for my son. Beautiful, successful, from a good family. Not like some people," she glanced in my direction, "who know how to shuffle around the kitchen and haul jars of pickles like their peasant grandmothers." The blood rushed to my head. I remembered every time I had driven Regina Valerie to doctors after her surgery, sat with her through the nights when she felt ill, cooked her diet meals, and washed her underwear because she didn't trust the staff with such delicate things. I couldn't take it anymore. I walked toward them with a firm step, toward Mark, his mother, and that woman who dared enter my home. "Violet," my voice sounded surprisingly steady, though I was shaking inside, "I must ask you to leave my house." "What?" She arched a plucked eyebrow. "You heard me perfectly. This is my home. Mark is my husband. Leave." "Get out, Ava," Mark roared. "I've lost my mind?" My voice cracked. "You brought a mistress to our home on your own birthday, and I'm the one who's out of line?" "What mistress?" Violet put her hand over her heart theatrically. "Mark, whatever she is, your wife? She seems unwell. Maybe some water or a doctor?" "Yes, she's just a jealous hysteric," Regina Valerie chimed in. "She sees a beautiful, successful woman and loses it. Mark, how long must we endure this? I told you from the start she's not for you, this beggar."
I sold the last things I had so he could get on his feet. I ate nothing but bread while he— Shut up! Mark grabbed my wrist and squeezed so hard I felt the bones creak. Stop embarrassing yourself. He dragged me toward the exit. The guests stepped aside. Someone pulled out a phone to film the scandal. In the foyer, I tried to break free, but he jerked me so sharply that I lost my house slippers. Either you apologize to Violet and behave decently, or get the hell out, he hissed in my face. This is my house, too. He burst out laughing. Nothing here is yours. Everything is registered to the company. Did you forget? You are nobody. Thunder rolled outside. The rain lashed against the glass. Lightning tore through the black sky over the San Francisco Bay. Mark flung the door open, and a gust of icy wind and rain burst into the hallway. Last chance, he said. Apologize and accept that Violet is part of my life now. Go to hell, I breathed. He shoved me out onto the porch. My bare feet hit the freezing, wet concrete, and I screamed in pain as I lost my balance and fell to my knees. The door slammed shut. The lock clicked. It's about time, Regina Valeri's voice drifted through the door. There's no room for beggars here. I pounded on the door with my fists, screaming for Mark, but music was already playing inside. The party continued. My dress was soaked through in seconds, my hair stuck to my face, and my teeth chattered from the cold. My feet went numb on the icy asphalt. Staggering, I went around the house to the living room window. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass and watched through the torrents of rain. Mark and Violet were cutting the birthday cake together, the very one I had ordered 1 week ago, choosing every tear. She playfully licked cream from his finger. He kissed her on the lips to the applause of the guests. Regina Valerie beamed beside them as if it were the wedding of her dreams. I slid down the wall onto the wet ground. Fragments of memories flashed through my mind. My mother's earrings in the pawnbroker's hands, packets of instant noodles for dinner, Mark's promise of a royal life, the scent of his cologne mixed with someone else's perfume. Everything I had fought for, everything I had endured, was a lie. The cold seeped deeper. I hugged my shoulders and curled into a ball right in a puddle. My breathing became ragged. Colored spots blurred before my eyes. God, I thought in a semi-delirium, if this is the end, let justice prevail. Let them pay for everything. Through the veil of fading consciousness, I heard the roar of a powerful engine cutting through the sound of the downpour. Bright headlights caught my huddled figure in the darkness, and a massive black Maybach pulled up right at the mansion gates. A driver in a sharp, dark suit stepped out first, opened an umbrella, and hurried to the back door. From the car emerged an elderly woman with a straight back, wearing an expensive graphite-colored cashmere coat. In her hand, she held a cane with a massive silver handle shaped like a wolf's head. Grandmother. My grandmother, Abigail Sarah, who supposedly lived out her days in a remote Oregon village with a garden and chickens, stood in the rain like an empress, surveying the grounds with a sharp gaze. She had come to every family holiday. Mark tolerated it for the sake of appearances, having no idea who he was actually tolerating. Her eyes slid over the illuminated windows, where the silhouettes of merry guests flickered, then stopped on me. Ignoring the puddles and mud, she walked quickly over and knelt beside me, taking my face in her warm, dry palms. "What have they done to you, baby?" Her voice trembled with barely suppressed rage. She took off her coat and wrapped it around me, holding me tight. She didn't smell like wood smoke and pickles, but like expensive perfume and the leather interior of a luxury car. Grandma, I could barely speak through my chattering teeth. Where did this car come from? Abigail Sarah didn't answer. She stood up, leaning on her cane, and took a long look at the mansion from the foundation to the roof ridge. Then she shifted her gaze to the window where Regina Valerie had appeared with a glass of champagne, animatedly telling a story to the guests. "Tear it down," Grandma said clearly. "All of it." Two tall men in dark suits, whom I hadn't noticed until that moment, stepped out of the darkness behind her. They nodded silently and headed towards the main entrance. "Stephen," Grandma barked at the third man, a broad-shouldered individual with a military bearing. "Help my granddaughter up and open the umbrella. Can't you see the girl is soaked through?" Stephen gently lifted me to my feet and held a massive black umbrella over us. We followed the bodyguards towards the house. They didn't bother with pleasantries. One braced his shoulder against the door, while the other kicked it. The lock snapped, and the door slammed open against the wall with a thunderous crash. A gust of icy wind and rain lunged into the warm foyer. The music cut off mid-note. Silence fell over the hall, broken only by the rhythmic drip-drip of water falling from my dress on the marble floor. "What the hell?" Mark dropped the fork he had been feeding Violet a piece of cake. "This is private property." He lunged towards the bodyguards, waving his arms. "I'm calling the police. You'll all go to jail for trespassing. Get out of my house." His attempt to push one of the guards ended predictably. Mark was sent flying backward, nearly taking out the buffet table. "Mark!" Violet shrieked, ducking behind his back. "What's happening?" The rhythmic thump of a cane on the marble announced Abigail Sarah's approach. She entered the hall with the air of an absolute sovereign. I walked beside her, leaving wet footprints on the polished floor. "Oh," Regina Valerie let out a nervous snicker. "I thought we were being robbed. Turns out it's just the country granny showing up with her jars of pickles. Our little beggar certainly found herself some interesting company." Violet relaxed on hearing this, allowing herself a condescending smirk. A few guests snickered, but most remained silent, eyeing the imposing bodyguards with growing dread. Abigail Sarah stopped directly under the crystal chandelier. She slowly scanned the room, her gaze lingering on each member of the trio, Mark, his mother, and his mistress. "Ava," Mark tried to regain control. "Get your grandmother out of here. She's clearly lost it. Besides, we already established you don't belong here." "Don't belong here?" Abigail Sarah spoke for the first time since entering. "We'll see about that." She struck her cane against the floor with sudden authority. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Stephen, her assistant, opened a leather briefcase and pulled out a thick black folder. Abigail Sarah took it and slammed it on the coffee table. "Read," she commanded Mark, "out loud so everyone can hear." "I'm not reading some scrap paper brought in by a crazy old woman." "Read," Grandma repeated, her voice laced with such a threat that Mark involuntarily reached for the folder.
He opened it and scanned the first page. His face began to drain of color. This is a forgery," he muttered. "What is it?" Violet peeked over his shoulder. Her eyes went wide. "Mark, what is Western Heights Group?" Regina Valerie snatched one of the sheets. After reading a few lines, she staggered and sank right onto the floor, heedless of her expensive dress. "It can't be," she whispered. You own half of San Francisco?" "Not half," Abigail Sarah corrected her. "Only 43% of the commercial real estate, but it's enough." "Grandma!" I couldn't believe my ears. She turned to me, a shadow of regret in her eyes. "Forgive me, baby. I didn't want you to find out this way. I planned to tell you when the time was right, but these people," she looked at Mark with disgust, "accelerated things. And honestly, I'm tired of the act. My garden is real, and the jars are real. That's where my soul rests. This," she gestured to the rich interior, "this is just business." Abigail Sarah straightened her back and addressed the crowd. "Many years ago, I decided to help my granddaughter live in comfort. Not directly, because I wanted her to build her own life without feeling indebted to her grandmother's capital. So, I became the anonymous investor for the company where her husband worked. I invested millions, secured contracts, and opened doors." "Mark," swayed, clutching the back of a chair. You were the silent partner? Mr. Peterson said we would have gone bankrupt without him." "Exactly. And do you know what you spent my money on?" Grandma nodded toward the documents. "Here it is, all your artistry. Credit cards, IOUs, receipts. This house was bought with funds from my holding company and is listed on the company's balance sheet. Your cars, jewelry, trips with this person," she nodded at Violet,
all paid for with money that was supposed to go toward business development. According to the contract, in the event of misappropriation of funds, I have the right to a premature return of the investment. The court issued the ruling 3 days ago. You just forgot to check your mail." But the house, I thought it was in my name," Mark gasped, clutching at a final shred of hope. "Check the public records," Abigail Sora scoffed. "It's there in black and white. The owner is Pacific Crest LLC, and who owns that LLC? Take 3 guesses. Call your lawyer if you don't believe me, though I doubt he'll answer. His office is being searched as we speak." "Abigail Sarah," Regina Valerie scrambled forward on her knees, trying to grab the hem of the coat. "Dear, sweet woman, we're family. I didn't mean to hurt Ava. I just thought Violet could help Mark rise even higher. Forgive us." Stephen delicately but firmly pushed her away. Meanwhile, Violet began to back away slowly towards the exit, clutching her handbag. "Stay right there," one of the bodyguards barked. "I didn't do anything," she shrieked. "I'm just a guest." "Bag on the table." "This is my private property. You have no right." The guard didn't argue. He simply wrenched the bag away and dumped the contents onto the table. Amid the lipstick, keys, and credit cards, gold rings, bracelets, and a pearl necklace tumbled out. "My jewelry!" Regina Valerie wailed. "Thief!" She lunged at Violet, but the guards held them both back. "Enough of this circus," Abigail Sarah cut them off. "Here are the terms. The house, the cars, the furniture, the accounts, everything reverts to me. You have 10 minutes to gather your personal belongings and documents and vacate the premises." "You can't!" Mark dashed towards the stairs. "My cash is up there." The bodyguards blocked his path. 9 minutes, Grandma said calmly. Regina Valerie rushed to me and grabbed my hand. "Ava, honey, tell her. We're family." "Family doesn't act like this." I yanked my hand away and looked her straight in the eyes. "Family doesn't throw their own out barefoot into the storm for the sake of strangers." 5 minutes, Grandma counted down. Mark scrambled through the hall, trying to grab anything he could. The car keys, the wallet, the phone. The security team methodically took everything except for their identification documents. Time was up. The bodyguards formed a semicircle and began pushing the 3 towards the exit. Mark resisted. Regina Valerie clung to the door frames. Violet tried to slip past them. It was all useless. They were shoved out onto the porch into the pouring rain. The door slammed. I walked to the window and watched them standing in the downpour, soaked, bewildered, unable to believe what was happening. Mark pounded his fists against the door. Regina Valerie was screaming something. Violet tried to find cover under the narrow ledge of the roof. "Go get warm, baby," Grandma said softly, coming up behind me. "The doctor will check your feet. Drink some hot tea." "Gram, all these years, why didn't you tell me?" "I wanted you to live your own life. I wanted you to be loved for yourself, not for your grandmother's millions." I sighed. "I miscalculated, like an old fool. I thought giving money would be enough. I should have watched the people around you more closely. Well, no matter. We'll fix it."
The doctor, a quiet man with a kind face, sat me on the sofa. He examined my feet, which were red from the cold, took my temperature, and wrapped me in a warm blanket. For the first time in years, I was being cared for as a human being, not used as a servant. Outside the window, 3 figures slowly receded into the darkness. The rain didn't stop, flooding the streets of San Francisco with icy torrents. They tried to find shelter first under a bus stop awning, but a security guard chased them away. Then they tried the entrance of a shopping mall, but they weren't allowed in due to their unseemly appearance. Eventually, they ended up in a small park near the Embarcadero, where they found a relatively dry bench under a spreading maple tree. Mark, who only a few hours ago sat like a king in his mansion, now sat on a wet bench, huddling against his mother and mistress in an attempt to preserve a sliver of warmth. His expensive suit had turned into a wet rag. His styled hair stuck to his forehead, and that $2 million watch no longer mattered. Regina Valerie's cough grew worse. The cold wind from the Pacific Ocean chilled them to the bone through their soaked clothes. Violet remained silent, hugging herself.
Her made-up face had turned into a mask of running mascara and smeared lipstick. In Mark's head, memories of a luxurious life flashed by. Restaurants where he left tips larger than the city's average salary, bottles of cognac worth hundreds of thousands opened out of sheer boredom, millions lost at the casino. Now every memory burned, reminding him of what was lost forever. Dawn found them on that same bench, soaked to the bone and shivering. Regina Valerie coughed so hard her whole body shook, while Mark sat staring at a single point, trying to comprehend the scale of the catastrophe. "It's all because of you," his mother suddenly exploded, shoving his shoulder with a weakened hand. "How could you not find out who that old woman was? How could you not know your company lived on her money?" "What about you?" Mark snapped back, turning to her with bloodshot eyes. "You're the one who brought Violet here, calling her your daughter." Violet, sitting between them, watched the bickering with cold calculation. In the pre-dawn haze, she noticed an approaching taxi. The driver was finishing his night shift. Without a word, she jumped up and waved her arms, running into the street. "Wait!" Mark grabbed her wrist. "Where are you going? We have to stick together. Start over." Violet wrenched her hand away and laughed, a sharp, contemptuous sound. "With you?" She looked him up and down and winced. "Living in a rented shack, eating pasta, waiting for you to get rich again? No thanks. I already went through that with my first husband." "But I thought, between us." "What was between us?" "Love." Violet opened the taxi door. "The only thing that interested me about you stayed back in that house. By the way, thanks for this." She patted her dress pocket, where a few bills she had lifted from his pocket during yesterday's scandal were hidden. Mark instinctively reached into his jacket pocket. Empty. "Thief," he exhaled. "Likewise, darling," Violet tossed back as she got into the car. The taxi pulled away, leaving the two of them alone on the deserted street. Mark watched the receding taillights, feeling his last hopes crumble. By noon, they reached the office center on Market Street, rumpled, dirty, smelling of dampness and despair. Mark still believed this was a misunderstanding, that the board of directors didn't know about the whims of a senile old woman. Mr. Rostovsky, the security guard at the entrance, recognized him despite his pathetic appearance. "I'm sorry, but you can't come in here." "What do you mean, can't? I'm the director of development." "You were," the guard corrected, pointing to a notice board. There hung an official order for the dismissal of Mark Rostovsky for gross violation of corporate ethics and misappropriation of company funds. Next to it was his photo with a red stamp, "Entry prohibited." "This is some kind of mistake." He lunged for the turnstiles, but a second guard blocked his path. "I demand a meeting with the board." "The board is in session right now," a familiar voice rang out. Paul Krylov, his former deputy and now acting director, stepped out of the elevator. A barely suppressed smirk played on Paul's face. "Paul, thank God!" Mark rushed to him. "Tell them this is a misunderstanding." "What misunderstanding, Mark?" Krylov pulled out a folder. "Here is all your artistry from the last 3 years. Kickbacks, shady schemes, diverting funds for personal needs. Abigail Sarah personally handed over the documents. By the way, she sends her regards." Employees passing through the lobby stopped to gawk at their former boss. Some pulled out phones to record video. "Remove them," Krylov barked at security, before heading back to the elevator. "Paul! Paul, wait!" Mark shouted as he was dragged out into the street. His last hope was his personal bank account. He remembered there should be about $2 million of bonuses he'd tucked away for a rainy day. At the Bank of America branch on Post Street, he was met by a young teller with a professional smile. "I lost my card, but I have my ID. I need to withdraw cash immediately." The girl entered the data into the computer, and her expression changed. "Mark Igor, unfortunately, your accounts are frozen." "Frozen? How?"
The district attorney's office has opened a criminal case under the article for embezzlement. Until the investigation is complete, access to funds is impossible. But this is my personal money. The documents state there is reason to believe, the teller hesitated. Basically, you should talk to a lawyer. Mark walked out of the bank on trembling legs. Regina Valerie was waiting on a bench by the entrance, huddling in her wet coat. Well, how much did they give you? He shook his head. There were no words. What do you mean? Nothing at all? Her voice broke. Mark, I need medicine. I have a fever. Regina Valerie covered her face with her hands and sobbed. A jagged, hopeless sound, the way people cry when their last shred of dignity has been stripped away. At a flea market near Mission District, Mark sold his Brioni suit for $5,000, a tenth of its actual value. The buyer, a second-hand dealer in a tracksuit, haggled for a long time, pointing his finger at the rain and mud stains. Brother, it's Brioni. It cost $150,000. It was worth that, but those days are gone, the dealer remarked philosophically. $5,000 is the final price. If you don't like it, take it back. This money was just enough for a week-long rental of a room in a run-down boarding house in Oakland. When they entered, Regina Valerie stopped at the threshold and pinched her nose. This isn't even a room. It's a snake pit. The walls are peeling and it smells like a latrine. You can sleep in the hallway if you want, Mark replied wearily, dropping their few belongings onto a sagging sofa. Their first dinner in this new reality consisted of a single can of sardines in tomato sauce shared between them and a loaf of black bread. Behind the wall, a drunk neighbor was screaming. Upstairs, someone was stomping like an elephant. A mosquito buzzed annoyingly in the corner. How did we come to this? Regina Valerie whispered, staring out a greasy window. Mark didn't answer. He sat on the edge of the sofa, counting his remaining change, realizing it wouldn't even cover the next week of rent. Meanwhile, in a spacious office on the top floor of the Sarah Heights mansion, Ava sat across from her grandmother, carefully studying financial reports. Do you see this expense item? Abigail Sarah pointed to a line in the document. Your ex-husband was writing off $3 million a month for representative needs. Do you know where that went? Restaurants? Ava guessed. Not just that. Casinos in Macau, yachts in the Bay Area, gifts for Violet. Look here, a necklace for $800,000, earrings for $500,000, and all while you were darning his socks. Ava felt something rising inside her. It wasn't resentment. No, the resentment was gone. Grandma, teach me everything. I want to know every detail of the business. Abigail Sarah smiled, for the first time in years, a truly warm smile. That's the right attitude, granddaughter. Let's start with the basics. Days turned into weeks of intensive training. Ava woke up at 6 in the morning and went to bed after midnight, studying contracts, financial statements, and investment strategies. Abigail Sarah proved to be a tough but fair teacher. Remember the main rule, she said, pacing the office. In business, there are no friends, only partners, and every partner is a potential enemy. Trust but verify. Always have a backup plan. Gradually, Ava transformed. The slouch of a woman used to making herself invisible vanished. Her walk became confident, her gaze direct. A stylist selected a wardrobe, strict, elegant, and emphasizing her new status. On the day Ava first entered the Sarah Heights Group boardroom as the future CEO, the board members stood up upon her arrival. She walked to the chair at the head of the table, the very one where her grandmother had sat for years. Gentlemen, she began, her voice steady, let us proceed to the review of the quarterly report. 1 month later, a local television station invited her for an interview regarding the development of the construction industry in California. Ava agreed. It was time to declare herself publicly. At that same time, Mark was hauling boxes at the port of San Francisco. His back ached from the constant load, and his hands were covered in blisters. In a day, he managed to earn maybe $1,500, barely enough for food and his mother's medicine. During his lunch break, he took shelter from the rain in a small cafe. An old TV above the counter was playing the local news. Joining us in the studio is Ava Sarah, the new CEO of the Sarah Heights Group Holding Company. The announcer declared. Mark lifted his head and froze. On the screen was Ava, but she was completely different. Confident, elegant, radiating calm power. She spoke about plans for a new residential complex and port infrastructure, answering tough questions with the ease of a professional. "Hey pal, you buying that burrito or just watching TV?" the clerk called out. Mark didn't answer. He stared at the woman he had once thrown out in the rain and couldn't believe his eyes. His throat tightened, not from envy, but from the realization of the sheer scale of his own stupidity. A decision formed instantly. Ava was always kind. She always forgave. Maybe if I explain, if I ask for forgiveness. The next day, he spent his last money on a bus to downtown. In the bus station restroom, he tried to tidy himself up, smoothing his hair with water and brushing off his rumpled jacket. It was useless. He looked like a vagrant, which, in essence, he had become. The lobby of the Sarah Heights Group skyscraper sparkled with marble and chrome. Mark approached the reception desk. "I need to see Ava Sarah. Tell her husband is here. Her ex-husband," he corrected himself. The receptionist looked him over and discreetly pressed an emergency button. "1 minute," she smiled, dialing an internal extension. "Security? We have an erratic visitor here claiming to be the CEO's husband." "I'm not erratic," Mark raised his voice. "Tell Ava I'm here. She'll see me." 3 security guards were already rushing toward him. "Sir, let's go." "Ava!" Mark screamed as they let him out. "Ava! I know you can hear me!" At that moment, the familiar Maybach pulled up to the main entrance. Stephen opened the door. Ava stepped out with a folder of documents, followed by her new assistant. Their eyes met. In Mark's eyes, there was plea, despair, and a frantic hope. In Ava's eyes, there was nothing. Absolute emptiness, as if she were looking right through him. She gave a slight nod of her head, a gesture of polite acknowledgement that a stranger existed, and walked into the building. The glass doors closed, cutting him off from her world forever.